I've been doing a little studying to try and get this RCA sorted out. And this book has told me a little bit about what's going on in that motor. And I still have some more to do before I discuss it, but I think I'm beginning to figure out how the thing works. It's not all that hard. And, I am an engineer, but I never really focused on motors. And so I'm having to kind of remember all the stuff I learned 30 years ago in school. So I will sort this thing out, and I know the motor works, but I want to understand how it works and how it reverses, because that will get down to the question. That will get down to the key of why I'm struggling with that. In the meantime, I have been doing some disassembly work. So here is the chassis as it sits right now. Let me straighten out the light situation. Here's the chassis as it sits right now. As you can see, I removed all of the tuning gear. So the motorized tuning, well, the motor is still sitting there because it's still connected, but I'll sort that out in a bit. I'm going to have to rebuild all these harnesses. They're all really stiff and brittle. So I've removed the tuning mechanism, all the clockwork drive, and the dial, and just about everything else that has to do with tuning. In fact, here are all the parts over here. So, of course, there's a tuning condenser, along with the preset discs. I have the dial, the tuning dial wheel on there, the dial string wheel. It's not really a string. This is kind of cool. I thought I'd have to replace the string. It's a metal cord, so like a brass cord. So that's really great. That's going to make that easy, so I don't have to worry about length or anything. Just put it back on. No big deal. All the other pieces. So, and here is the whole dial assembly. So real nice and modular. This thing, it wasn't that hard to take apart. The hardest part was getting all the connections loose for all of the tuning condenser parts. So let's take a look at the other side of this chassis. So here we go. There's the chassis. There's all these ground connections for the tuning condenser. And they're a pain because this stuff here is all in the way. And I don't want to horse with this stuff because the radio was playing before and I don't need to mess with it. So we have, IF cans and oscillator coil and stuff like that. I don't want to horse with that because you start messing with that when you don't need to, you get yourself in trouble. So here are the fingers that are part of the preset. This came out as an assembly. So RCA really built this radio pretty well because all this stuff was easy to remove. And so I am going to replace these wires, but I can do them one at a time, and I can just follow them as I go. If I had to remove them all ahead of time, I'd be labeling a bunch of stuff, and it's a real pain. So I'll build the harness and then attach them one at a time. As I said, there is the motor. Let me get these lamps out of the way here. There is the motor still connected. And I don't really need to test it anymore. The motor's working, and so I'll clean the bearing points for the rotor. I'll check everything out. I think the motor is going to be fine. I'm not sure. I think it's a brushless motor. I don't really know. I sure wish I was an expert on motors. I just have so much to learn about them. But I'll keep going. But I need to get this radio done. So what I'm going to do, I bought a new tripod for my. It's funny. Last year I spent $1,000 on a video camera, and the darn thing doesn't take as good of videos as my phone. There are certain things about it that are better, but my phone all around is much easier to use and actually takes better video. So I bought a tripod and a device to hold my phone. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up, and then I'll get started on looking a little deeper at this chassis. Okay, I'm going to start to take apart this chassis. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wait on this tuning condenser until later. I am not going to worry about the motorized tuning until I've got the chassis set up. And the reason I'm doing that is because this owner did indicate that he would like to have the automatic tuning, the electric tuning working, but it's not absolutely, I mean, you know, that's, if I can, if at all possible, but he still wants the radio to work if it doesn't work. So given that I have limited time, I'm going to go ahead and chase after the rest of the radio first, and that way I won't get interrupted when I'm in the middle of sorting out this tuning. It'll give me time to read my book and understand some other things about this. But what I'd like to point out is this has all these gears, all this clockwork, but at the very front of it, it's very much like a Philco tuning mechanism, in that, you know, it's got this, I'm sure there's a ball and socket arrangement in there for this, well, maybe not, because yeah, this is the knob end. So yeah, I'm sure that's a ball, and that's like a planetary ball bearing drive. Well, it might be hard to see in the video, but this thing is actually a little adjustable up and down. And I showed some damage in an earlier video of the half moon gear right at the end of travel. It was damaged. Well, I found that if I adjust this up just to tighten it a bit, it doesn't get stuck like that, and it also doesn't cause more damage. So I really think this adjustment needs to be made, so I'll get that done. I'm going to set this aside for now, and I will get to work on the chassis. All right, I think I'll start on the chassis now. One of the toughest things about working on old radios is that every one of them is different, and there are different challenges with each one. This one here, it's going to be a challenge to turn it upside down and work on it comfortably without doing any damage to these cans here. A lot of times the transformer is a little bit taller, and I can use that as a base. Sometimes I like to stand them up so they're vertical, but this chassis is really tall, and I think this one is shallow enough that it's going to be easier to work on with it laying upside down. So I'm going to try with some wood blocks. Sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error until you get it right. So we get to... Oh, by the way, guys, if you've been watching my videos at all, you know that I have a hell of a time staying on camera. So I put these blue stripes on my bench, and hopefully that'll help me to stay in frame. So let's see how that works out. Oh, this is a beast of a chassis. Oh, you know what? First things first. This motor needs to come out, because it's going to cause me some grief if I damage it. So I'm going to go ahead and just clip the wires, since they're going to be replaced anyway. And I clip them with enough of the wire left over on the motor so that I don't have to figure out what the hell color went where. And then I'll label the harness so I know which harness is right. Here, this is for you, John. John in Arkansas. You guys watch John in Arkansas's videos. He loves to cut stuff. He loves to snip it out of there. Okay, there's the motor. So I got enough lead on each one to know what the heck was there. I'll set that aside. I'll put that in a box later for safekeeping. For now, I just want to label that before I forget what I'm doing. If you're not in the habit of labeling everything as you go, then you make a lot of mistakes and do a lot of troubleshooting afterward. Most of the time, I always label everything, and most of the time I'll fire up a radio and it'll work pretty darn well the first time out of the box if the radio was working before, because I label everything and I take my time, and so I don't run into that many I don't make that many mistakes as far as wiring goes. Everybody makes mistakes, and I still make my share, but I make fewer of them because I have taken the time to label stuff. You know, this needs to go too, because I'm not going to be powering this up until I'm pretty much done with the chassis. So there's the nasty power cord, that's gone. See how much cleaner things look when you start to get rid of things? You know, I'm starting to understand why John gets so excited about using the snips. All right, so wires out of the way. I'll be real careful about this guy here. I don't want to smash that because I'd really be stuffed if I mess that one up. So let's get that tucked away. These here need to be tucked away. These are those fingers, little like reed switches. I want to be real careful about those too. I'm half tempted to cut that out too, but for right now I'll leave that in circuit. Okay, here we go. Let's turn this puppy upside down. One more precaution. I know I'm building suspense, guys. That's you know that's a cinematic technique, of course. I'm trying to build some suspense here. Basically, I don't want this wire getting trapped in my way while I got this thing up in the air. That'll keep that kind of steady. This won't get squished. Let's steady those. You know, I'm going to clean and polish all of this top of this chassis once I've got the underside done. So don't worry about the tape. I'm not hurting a thing. I don't like things flopping around. It's not a good idea to have things flopping around. That's how you break stuff. And I don't like to break things because then I got to fix them. And that means that it takes me longer. And the fixing things I break is not the fun part of radio hobby. And fixing things I break is the part of the radio hobby that makes me cuss and call myself bad names. So, okay, so this stuff's going to stay safely tucked out of the way. Now I can flip it around to my heart's content. One more. I forgot about this guy. Let's tuck him over here safely too. The reason I'm doing this, I have done this kind of thing before, where I've set a heavy chassis down on a fragile component and broke it. And I'm telling you, man, nothing makes you more unhappy than to break something that you know you can't just run down to Walmart and pick up. I think Walmart stopped carrying these parts, you know, probably 60 years ago. All right, see how nice that is? Now I can, if I don't break it on the lamp, I can do my little flippy thing with abandon. The tuning eye socket, I will take that out of the way in just a second. This kind of stuff will drive you nuts, guys, but you want to make sure you don't let it cause you problems. I always keep a lot of this wide painter's tape around. It's not that expensive. They have off brands you can buy cheap. I've noticed that I used to restore cars, and I have noticed that the car people, especially in the kind of cars I was messing with, so I did some Porsches and a lot of French cars, Renaults, Simca, Peugeot, stuff like that. Those guys don't seem to mind spending money. You know, I did a lot of Volkswagens. Volkswagen people are cheap, but the Porsche people and the French car people, the Renault people and Simca people, they didn't mind spending money. But I have noticed that radio hobbyists are a frugal bunch. Not quite sure why that is, what makes them like that, but I have noticed that to be the case. So, I guess you all probably understand when I say, talking about spending money you don't really want to spend. This is a bugger because if you look at the top of these cans, there are like slug screws right here, and you bend one of those and you've caused problems. So I might take like an aerosol can from a can of paint and tape it over that at some point. I won't do it right now, but I will tape it over that so I don't even bump the thing while I'm working on this. That's nastiness when you have to fix stuff like that. This radio is just covered with protrusions and things like that I have to worry about. I really want to work on this upside down. That is the best way that I can see to work on this radio. So 2x4 in that transformer will lift, two 2x4s in that transformer will lift it high enough. And then a 2x4 vertically and a 2x4 laying down should get me over the hill on these. Okay, so I'm going to grab myself some 2x4s and I'll restart the video at that point. After much fiddling with pieces of wood and various shims, I was able to get this thing propped up how I need it to be. Alright, so this part's going to be real easy. I mean, I think it is, except for all the wiring. As I mentioned in a previous video, all of this wire is just nasty. Look at that. I don't know if, I hope you can see that. This wire is just falling off. It's not good at all. So all that's going to have to be replaced. Thankfully, they're not that hard to get to. When I did a Zenith recently, a small chassis black dial Zenith, it just about drove me bananas because not only did it have just as many wires to replace, I mean, and everywhere, the chassis was about a third the size of this thing with just as many wires, and they were all under and snaked through, and it was a real bugger. So this part, at least that part of replacing these wires won't be that hard. So what I'm going to do is get started on wires one at a time. As I do wires, I'll do components. So the way I usually do it, and everyone does their own thing. I'm not saying I do it right. But I'll start at one end of the radio. I usually start at the rectifier end. I'll do everything except the electrolytics, because I like to make space for the electrolytics. You know, you can restuff cans if you want. I'm not into it. No thanks. So I'll make space for the electrolytics by getting rid of all these big fat paper and wax capacitors. Once I've done that and changed the resistors and worked through the wires, I work through the radio till I get to the other side. Then I'll have room to go ahead and I'll find a spot to where to put the electrolytics. But I like to do, I do the coil method where it makes sense. Other places it's just as easy. If I'm doing, 2 or 3 things on one terminal, then I'll go ahead and remove the solder and lift all the wires from that terminal. Having 2 or 3 coils on a single terminal just looks silly. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't look good. One is my limit. If I have to have more than one coil method on a piece of wire coming off of a terminal, then it's time to remove everything from that terminal. It looks unprofessional to me to have more than one. One is fine, but beyond that, I don't like the way it looks. So, I'll work through it, wires, resistors, capacitors, all at the same time, and just sort of spread through the radio, doing one at a time, very carefully. I don't have a bunch of things disconnected at any one time, just one terminal at a time. Now, the other end of what's on that terminal, obviously, I'm going to leave connected. And what I do then is I connect the new component, and I lay it right alongside the old component. And then when I get to where the old component connects up, then I'll remove the old component, connect the new one. And, obviously the values will be the same or similar, so I'd be able to tell. And I have been very fortunate in that I've made very few mistakes that way. And it also enables me to walk away from it for a little bit and come back and still not get lost. The last thing you want is about 30 wires in here disconnected, or 30 components just laying there, and you have no idea where they go. Sometimes wire dress is not like the schematic, so that doesn't help you looking at the schematic. You want to do it one at a time. Alright, so I'm going to get started. I'll pause the video. I'll throw in bits and pieces as I run into interesting stuff, but we've all done, caps and resistors and wires. We all know how to do that, and I don't want to bore you with that. So I'll just do a check-in as I go through this radio. A couple stages at a time. I'll show you what I've got. Because the really interesting stuff on this radio is on the other side of the chassis, and there's probably going to be more to show you on that. So I'll go ahead and get started on that, and I'll check in with you when I've got some done.